All right, Mr. Bobby Czyz, thank you very much for returning to TheBoxingBar.com and welcome.
Thank you kindly.
Bobby, today's topic is going to be Iron Mike Tyson. When was the first time you heard or saw Mike Tyson fight?
You know what's funny? The first time I saw Mike Tyson fight, he fought on the undercard of one of my fights. The headliner was Michael Spinks versus Stephen Tankstead, and I fought Slobodan Kuchar for the light heavyweight title as a co-feature. Mike Tyson was the third bout, fighting a guy named Alfonso Ratliff, and that was the three-card show that was on Showtime.
What did you think of his career prior to his imprisonment?
Well, Mike Tyson was brought along properly, plus he's a little bit of a freak of nature. I mean, he's incredibly strong. I've worked with guys that I've hired in training camp when I was a cruiserweight and a super cruiserweight. I've worked with some guys that I hired in camp that sparred with Mike. And I was paying these guys decent amounts of money per week to work with me, 4 or 5 days a week in the ring. And some of these guys, I could really bang them as hard as I wanted to. They weren't going anywhere. They told me they were hired by Mike's camp a couple of times. That they got hit so hard the first day, they quit. And he was paying them 3 times what I was paying them. So I know from people that have worked with Mike and people that have fought Mike Tyson has some freakish power. And he had a good trainer in Customato for the fact that Customato was an excellent trainer if you were short for your weight. If you were tall for your weight, Customato would get you killed. He tried to work with Jerry Cooney, almost got Jerry Cooney killed. Because he's a peekaboo, keep your head down, bob and weave guy. If you're 6'5", that's certainly not what you want to do. Mike was great.
And he was very much an old-school type fighter. He kept his hands tucked under his chin like the old-school fighters did, but he bobbed and weaved very well. Where do you think that power, you being a boxer, where do you think that power came from? Was it because he was so compact and close to the ground, it was so easy for him to spring up and hit?
Well, you have to get your power from your legs in the ground, but he sprung up, but he also had great deal of speed, and he had some decent mass, 215, 220 pounds, and it's coming at you really hard. Think about this, and logically, you'll understand the principle. A bullet doesn't kill you because it's big and strong, but it's going real fast, so it goes right through you. If a cannonball could travel at the speed of a bullet, it would go through 20 buildings instead of one. So the speed times the mass is going to cause nothing but destructive power.
Very well put. He comes out of prison, of course, in March of 1995 after serving 3 years. He returns that year to the ring in August of that year. What did you think we were going to see prior to that fight itself on that particular day of his comeback against Peter McNeeley?
Well, if you go back and watch the fight, I did the broadcast of that fight, actually, and they will go, won't go in the casinos in Vegas where they can say, well, will the fight go this long or that long? It's kind of like the under and over in a football game or a baseball game or a basketball game. The will go, won't go. And I said, I think that the will go, won't go should be put at a minute. I don't think the fight's going to go longer than a minute. The fight lasted 59 seconds, so I was pretty accurate. That's what I thought was going to happen. I thought Mike was going to come at him, hit him, the fight was going to be over, pretty much. I mean, Peter McNeeley was not as good as his record would indicate because the compilation of the people he fought, their total records were like 26 wins and 247 losses. So he was, just a hyped up, not real talent.
And how did you feel about getting that assignment to work or commentate on that card? Was that just another day in the office for you, or did it feel like something special when you got called to do that assignment?
Well, I was doing, at that time, I had contracts with Showtime that I was working with them since 92 all the way through to 2003. So all the fights they broadcasted they weren't all just another day at the office. However, the anticipation that Mike had created amongst the boxing public and the regular public because of how great he was before he went in and how here he was coming out, certainly it's a special occasion. You get some extra butterflies, extra nervousness just to see the event. Mike Tyson, when he fought, was more like he was an event as opposed to just a person going to work.
And what was the feeling like at the entrance when he was walking in for that first fight? Of course, you were there at ringside commentating for that fight. What was it like with the lights off and the music going and the feeling of the crowd? Was it something that you remember vividly?
Well, I don't remember that as vividly as I remember the fights with Holyfield. The fights with Holyfield, I mean, you could cut the tent, you could taste it cut the tension in the air with a knife. I mean, it was so, the atmosphere and the crowd, the celebrities, multiple different acclaimed so-called experts who just all had their own idea of how the fight was going to go. Those types of fights those are the things that come around once in a while. It's nothing but awe, you're in awe of it. You really are. It's just such a breathtaking experience. You almost feel, having been a fighter and having world titles in several divisions, I know what's at stake. Second place is last place. So So, it's all or nothing. I mean, that is like the ultimate gamble, especially with one's body and health, too.
Of course, McNeeley gets dropped during that fight, and pretty much the first punch thrown by Tyson gets dropped for the first time. He gets up, he makes a pretty good account of himself for the next, like you said, almost minute, and then he gets dropped with an uppercut for the second time, about the 50-second mark. What did you think of that DQ stoppage, and what did you think of McNeeley's corner coming in to stop the fight at that point?
Look, they knew if they didn't, all that was going to happen if Peter McNeeley, and I believe Peter McNeeley had some pride, and I believe he wanted to make a good showing and acquit himself as well as he could, but the fact of the matter, he just didn't have the talent to do that. And I think that Mr. Vecchione, which was his trainer and manager, did the right thing. All he was going to get was hurt really badly, because after getting knocked down and getting hammered a second time, and you could see in his eyes, he just wasn't all there. He wasn't back to normal. His legs weren't under him, and when somebody hits as hard as Mike's coming, there's always a chance that something could happen that hurts him permanently, and there's no need for that.
His second comeback fight came in December of that same year in '95 against Buster Mathis Jr. on national television. Tyson wins by third-round knockout. Football icon John Madden did the pre-fight interview. You did the post-fight interview in the ring with them. What was it like interviewing him inside the ring on that day?
Well, I like Mike, and I had some other questions, but there was time limits and people in your ear telling you, ask this question, ask that question. There were certain other questions I wanted to ask him, and then okay, you got to cut, throw it back to the desk. It was an interesting experience. I wish I could have done it over, because I thought I would have had certainly some better questions to ask him. I thought they were more well-suited to inform the public as to where Mike Tyson felt his performance was and what he needed to work on now, being the post-prison setup and moving toward the title again.
Was that something unusual for you to do a post-fight interview with somebody, or was that common for you?
It wasn't common for me. I haven't done many. Matter of fact, I'd only done one or two, but I did, over the years, I did one, I think, for NBC or two for NBC many, many years ago. But it wasn't common for me to do that. Generally speaking, that was Ferdy's job, and this particular instance, I think the fight was on Fox instead of Showtime, so they wanted me to do it.
And his third fight after his imprisonment, of course, after 3 years of being in jail, a lot of people thought he shouldn't have got a title shot just 2 fights in for that third fight there against Frank Bruno. Did you think that was a right step for Tyson at that point, or did you think he might have needed a few extra fights before fighting Frank Bruno for that title?
No, because before he went in, he was the guy. He was the man to beat. And right now, he comes out. Yeah, the 2 fights were not against really high opposition, Buster Mathis and Peter McNeeley. Neither one of them ever had a chance of hurting Mike or even, making it into late rounds. So at the same time, it was a little soon. Look how long did the champ went with him when he fought him again. He didn't make much better account of himself.
And it was funny, right before the knockout there in the third round where Tyson knocks out Frank Bruno for that title, you had just finished saying that it was a very similar Mike Tyson from before the imprisonment, and pretty much at that point, within seconds, Tyson, of course, knocks him out. Did he look that similar as he did before going into prison at that point in his career?
He looked like he had a lot of the old Mike Tyson right back, and I didn't expect too much difference because it wasn't very late in his life when this incident happened and he went to prison. It wasn't as if he was 31 and he was coming out at 35 or 36. And, he came in looking like the Mike Tyson we all became very used to and accustomed to watching knock guys out. And, again, Frank Bruno didn't do much better than McNeeley or Mathis. So I think, the answer to the question himself, yeah, he was ready. He was very ready.
September of that year of '96, he fights Bruce Seldon in a fight that a lot of people still talk about this day, where a lot of people thought it was a suspect fall that Seldon took in the first round there against Mike Tyson. How do you remember that fight, and what do you remember about the crowd's reaction, just like your guys' reaction, kind of in disbelief? What do you remember about that?
I remember that Mike Tyson came at him like he always does, but he didn't hit Seldon clean, and Seldon went down anyway. And he decided this fight's over. He got his payday. Seldon was not a fighter with a great chin, good boxer, some decent power, but he was not a fighter that could take a great shot, and he was scared to death of Mike, I think. And, I like Bruce. He was a great guy, but in that fight, he just didn't look like himself at all. I think he was intimidated by the legend of Mike Tyson that was, being built at that time, and I just didn't think he gave it his all. I just didn't.
Would you say that he kind of took that fall, or do you think it was a legitimate knockdown?
No, I haven't seen the fight in so many years, and I would need to relook at it, but I thought at the time I remembered pretty clearly that, he got up, and the ref, I didn't think it was a big big shot, but he went down, and he got up, and as the referee was starting to let the fight go, he started to wobble after the 8 count, and then the referee stopped it. Well, that's a little unusual. So thus I suspected that he just didn't want to get his payday and get out without getting hurt, because, in all honesty, he's never going to beat Mike Tyson, and when Mike's in that kind of shape.
And just a little extra information here for everybody that might be listening. Of course, rapper Tupac Shakur was shot after that particular fight. Do you remember all that hype around that during that time?
I remember the hype about it. At the time, I was, not anywhere near the incident itself, so it was just another story that showed up in the papers the next day.
Evander Holyfield, of course, was the next fight for Tyson in November of that year. You had just fought Evander Holyfield months before. Going into that fight, what did you think of Evander Holyfield's chances of beating Mike Tyson at that point?
Well, I didn't think Evander Holyfield's chance of beating Mike Tyson was that good, but I thought they were considerably better than other people thought, only because Evander was a smarter fighter. I knew when I fought Evander he would not give me the respect that I was as tough as I was and that I would be able to withstand his barrages. And he didn't train, I think, for the fight to go to later rounds. And, a year after we fought, he said in the paperwork, he said, Bobby Czyz would have went one more round. He said, I was just going to quit. I just didn't have it that day. And I think that he didn't train. I think he underestimated me a little bit. But he didn't underestimate Mike Tyson. He gave Mike Tyson his due and prepared like a machine. He prepared to do battle, and he did.
You brought up a little bit of that fight, the excitement, that tension in the air that you could cut with the knife on that particular night. After the first round, let's say, I think you had made a statement during that first round that it was just a matter of time before Tyson would hit Holyfield and he'd really feel it. How did you feel after that first round, after seeing Holyfield taking a lot of Tyson shots?
Well, I'll tell you what, he took the shots very well, and I know Evander's got the heart of a lion. I saw him with the wars he had with Riddick Bowe and other fighters. I mean, not a huge heavyweight. He was basically a cruiserweight turned into a heavyweight, but man had the heart the size of a lion, and he knew how to box and could punch too. So that always makes for a dangerous opponent.
Evander Holyfield takes out Tyson in 11 rounds there via knockout. You had made a statement actually after that fight that you were willing to take on Holyfield again and do a rematch with him. Did you mean that, and how do you think you would have prepared for that particular fight?
I'm not a better fighter. I don't have the body or the size or the natural, as some people would call it, God-given talent that Evander Holyfield has. He's a better fighter than I was. However, I knew in the day I fought him, he underestimated my toughness, and he would get tired, and he started to, and he even admitted it a year after the fight. If he fought me again, he would train harder, and he would probably do much the same as he did in the first fight. He would probably beat me a little more soundly because he was just too big. I was not big enough to fill a heavyweight shoes. I tried, but I just didn't have the size.
Of course, Tyson asked for a rematch after losing that one. In June of 97, he gets his wish. He fights Evander Holyfield again. Going into that fight, what do you remember thinking about that? Did you think Tyson was going to go ahead and avenge that win, or did you know that he was in trouble?
I thought Tyson had a good chance of avenging the win. He realized with some of his mistakes we made in the first fight, some of the things he did in the first fight. He also realized that Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson didn't train but for 3 or 4 rounds. And he said, I didn't even, he said, I watched him fight you, Bobby. He said, I didn't really give him that much credit. And he said, that was a foolish thing to do. So I talked to him a few times, and we've been very friendly. And I believed in a second fight it was going to go to a decision, but it was going to be an exciting fight. And then, and it's been reasonably well documented. Evander does some dirty things in the ring. He uses his elbows a lot. He hits low sometimes. He did it to me with forearms. I'm not a Girl Scout. I rough people up in the ring. Mike lost his mind and just snapped that day and bit his ear off. And it was the single most amazing fight I'd ever called for craziness and weirdness.
I'm sure it would have been hard for either of you guys, whether it been you or Ferdy or Steve Albert who called that fight, to be watching that live and to know that everybody's listening to you guys, call that fight, and then something like that happens. Did you kind of freeze up there when that happened, or what were you guys' initial reaction to that?
Well, what I said at that time was, and I said, I believe this is the first time I can actually say that I'm at a loss for words. I don't know what to say. And then as we talked about it amongst ourselves, I talked about something that I called situational or performance blackout, because there have been times when I was in the ring and you're in the heat of battle and you do something, your body just does it, and you don't even remember doing it. You didn't consciously do it. Now, I've seen people do that in a number of different situations. I fought a gentleman named Donnie Lalonde in 1992, and I was beating him soundly almost every round from pillar to post. And during one of the rounds, I hit him, and then I elbowed him right in the face, and he took a point away from me. The referee, penalized me. And after the fight, I said to one of the guys in my crew, I said, what the hell did they take a point for? He goes, you elbowed him right in the face. I said, no, that's a lie. And I went back to watch the tape, and I elbowed him right in the face. I don't even know why. Haven't got a clue. Didn't register. So I can understand. And as time went by, there was a doctor, one of the doctors for the Las Vegas Athletic Commission said that it's not called situational performance blackout, but your description of it is accurate. There are times when people under great pressure react and have no memory of it whatsoever. It's not an intentional. Hard to believe that he bit his ear off and it's not intentional, but that's what was said by the doctor.
And actually, I think you did make a statement to something like, hey, if I would have got bitten, I would have kicked him. I think you made some kind of comment like that.
I think the extreme, it wasn't, see, here it makes the difference for me, at least, as not just an expert analyst, but as someone who was in the ring, but as also a fan watching the fight. If he just reacted and bit him, that was one thing. But when he bit him, he bit down and tore his head to the side to make sure he took the ear off. That's a conscious
reaction
effort to make sure you take some of that ear with you. That, to me, made it a little worse, made the foul a little worse.
Tyson, of course, gets suspended after that, comes back in January of '99, and he fights Franz Botha, and everybody kind of had Tyson under a microscope there and was watching his every move from there on. Of course, after the first round or at the end of the first round, there was some kind of clinch. Tyson grabbed Botha's arm, grabbed it, and kind of pulled upwards like if he was trying to break it. How did that feel watching that particular move, knowing that he had just got suspended and got in trouble for that last thing with that ear-biting incident?
Well, as the rumors circulate through the industry, you see people that are talking about, all you got to do is frustrate Mike Tyson, and he'll do something so outrageous you'll win by disqualification. And anybody who beats Mike Tyson, even by disqualification, there's some minor badge of honor there that they beat Mike Tyson. And so a lot of people tried to frustrate him and taunt him, hold on to him a little longer. Plus, Mike Tyson hit so hard that if he got near you, you wanted to hold on to him. You wanted to clinch. You wanted to do that. And, it's just one of those things that it's never going to disappear. There are always going to be some guys who are a little rougher than others, some a little meaner than others, and some a whole lot nastier than everybody else.
Of course, Franz Botha got KO'd in the fifth round, but a lot of people thought he was actually even winning the fight up until that one punch that Tyson hit him with and knocked him out with. Do you agree with that, or did you think Tyson was winning up until that fifth round where he did knock him out?
I think if memory serves me correctly, and it's been a while, I think I may have had the fight even, but, Botha wasn't doing anything over-impressive, and he was trying to box from the outside, and that was where he was being most effective, but that's not his style, and there's no way he was going to do that for 12 rounds. And eventually, Mike turned the right hand in, and that was the end of that.
His next fight up was Orlin Norris, Terry Norris's brother, one of my favorite fighters. That fight happens at the end of the round, kind of similar thing. Tyson hits him at the end of at the bell pretty much, almost exactly at the same time as the bell. It was called no contest because Norris couldn't continue. What did you think of that stoppage? What did you think of that decision and that official ruling of a no contest?
No contest fitted because I think Orlin Norris could have continued, but was looking for a reason for a rematch and another payday. And again, sometimes at the bell, if you follow back, I was fighting a guy named Diamond Jim McDonald, who I didn't like. He badmouthed me the whole time I was in Atlantic City for 3 to 4 days leading up to the fight, and I didn't like the guy. I had an extra intense hatred for him. So you can see in one of the rounds, I think in the fourth round, I have him in the corner, I have him in trouble, and I'm beating on him, and the bell rings. I just keep beating on him, and I didn't hear the bell. And again, this would be like a situational or performance, not necessarily blackout, but lack of registering something that's happening around you because you're so intent on doing what you're doing, you're so concentrated, focused, you don't see or hear anything outside your television. And I think that happened to Mike, possibly. I don't think he did it on purpose. I don't think Orlin Norris represented any great threat to Mike, and that's what it was.
This is why I asked you to do this, Bobby, because you know exactly what you're talking about. You could compare what Tyson did to how it happened in your life, and you're the perfect person to ask about all this stuff. Julius Francis was next up. Tyson tried to do a little world tour there. He went to the United Kingdom to do this fight against Julius Francis, knocked him out in the second round. What was that feeling like to be working over there in England, in Julius Francis' hometown, but yet everybody was cheering Tyson as if he was home?
That was kind of odd. We made some comments about that, and it's very rare that you're in your hometown and then they're cheering for the other guy. So that is an interesting situation, but I enjoyed traveling, whether it was Mike or any of the other fights that I've done abroad. I've been 26 or 27 different countries. Most of them was for broadcasting reasons, some for vacation reasons, but it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed to have us, 4 or 5 days around other cultures and see how people live, see how they interpret different things and how they feel about the American people. So it was fun. It was just fun, but most of the time when I was on the road with the fights, it was work. I getting interviews and rehearsing and doing work. Not too much fun.
5 months later, he meets up against Lou Savarese there in Glasgow, Scotland. Knocks him out in the first round without some kind of controversy there. Tyson clinching with Savarese. When the referee came to step in to push him away, Tyson swung, pretty much hit the referee with his bicep, dropped him down. What did you think of that situation?
Well, some of the referees are more tentative than others, especially when you have big fighters like Tyson and Savarese and heavy hitters. So some of the referees don't shout loud enough or do not take firm enough action when they break fighters. You can't just start walking over to a fighter and not expect that he's not going to still be throwing punches. So, and God forbid he should miss and turn around and clock a referee. I've seen it done more than once. I've seen referees actually get knocked down, and some of them not out, but really dizzy. So it does happen.
What was Scotland like for you?
Scotland was nice. I didn't think I went to a place where I wasn't treated well. I mean, even as I went to Guangzhou, China, which is, trust me, if you want to make Harlem look like Arizona, and it's really, really bad in China. And some of the places you go, if you don't bring your own bottled water, you will wind up with dysentery 100%. There are some places that are less fun, and other places that are more fun. And it's funny. I mean, I was in Lyon, France, culinary capital of the world, and I got food poisoning. It happens, even though I love the French food. I've been there in Paris several times. It was absolutely awesome.
Andrew Gulotta was next up for Tyson. This time, it was the other way around. Andrew Gulotta pretty much quit during the fight in the third round. But yet, Tyson was kind of blamed for that for whatever reason, maybe because of his aura and all that. What do you remember about that particular fight?
I didn't totally understand it, so it was difficult. It was never explained to me exactly why he quit and exactly what the issue was. And when Mike Tyson fights anybody, there's going to be some controversy any chance they get, because all that does is add to the publicity and add to the urban legend side of his life, as well as his legendary status. So they're always just going to say what they're going to say, whether it's legitimate, accurate, or otherwise.
And that was here in the United States. Then he heads back to Denmark for that fight. A lot of people thought it was weird how he went all the way to Denmark to fight Brian Nielsen. What did you think of that fight? What do you remember about that?
Well, I didn't expect Nielsen to go that long, and he didn't, I don't think. Memory serves me correctly. I forget what round.
7.
I wasn't that impressed with Nielsen.
What was Denmark like?
I'll be honest with you, and this is, I'm sure, a PG-rated station. Denmark is like the pornography capital of the world, so if you walked in the hotel room and put on the TV, they have people doing rated X stuff on regular television, which shocked the hell out of me. The place itself, I enjoyed the people. I went out, spent some time after the fight in the nightclub, and the restaurants were okay. I had no problems with that.
So after all these fights that we've been talking about, Bobby, it leads up to him fighting the guy that was supposed to be the man. Of course, at that time was Lennox Lewis. Do you think Tyson should have took that fight after all these fights? Do you think he was ready to go in there? Or do you think it was all just pretty much just for hype and for the money and the fame at that point? Do you think he should have been in the ring with Lennox Lewis at that point?
I certainly think if they fought a few years earlier, that would have been maybe a different outcome. But I will tip my hat to Lennox Lewis, because here, in essence, is the fight game when we talk about people being intelligent, smart, making adjustments. After the first round, if you didn't have a great first round, you need to be able to, your corner needs to be smart enough, and or yourself, to make the adjustments for what was not working. And I think Mike Tyson's people did make the adjustments, and Lennox Lewis' people's game plan was on the money, and he made adjustments as they went along. So every time Mike Tyson had a good round, he would come back to Lennox Lewis and then turn it into something in his favor. I just think Lennox had a perfect night.
And I think you had said something like similar to this. I think it was you that had said something like he had a very much a puncher's chance to win that fight, especially knowing that Lewis's chin was very suspect.
Well, here's the thing. If you get knocked out cold with one shot, it's going to be hard to maintain. You got a great chin. And Lennox didn't get hit that cleanly by Mike. He rolled with the punches. He blocked. The defense was good. So when Oliver McCall hit him with one shot, he was out. He couldn't get up after 10 seconds. Same thing happened to Rockman. And getting knocked out twice for one shot, I think, makes some things suspect.
I totally agree with you, and I think that's why I bought that fight. If it wasn't for that, I think, I wouldn't have bought the fight. But I think everybody that did buy that fight, bought that little chance that Tyson did have to knock out Lewis. I remember after that particular fight, I thought you and Lampley, I remember talking to somebody watching that particular pay-per-view, and I thought you and Lampley made the best pair I had ever seen in commentating. I mean, I wish that could have stayed together for a long time, or still till now.
Well, Lampley did say that was the best boxing broadcast he had ever been a part of, and he thanked me. He said your unusual nature of you having walked this walk, having fought in this many weight divisions, owning world titles in 3 of them, and yet speak so well and so eloquently and can articulate what was going through a fighter's mind, body, etc. He said it's extremely unusual. He said, and it just worked perfectly. He said it was the best broadcast fight-wise he'd ever done.
Easily. And later on, I thought that while it was going on, later on I would read in magazines and reviews thereafter, everybody was saying the same thing. What was it like working with him, and how was it like working with him knowing that you guys were walking on pretty much separate sides of the street, him for HBO, you for Showtime? What was it like, and how did that come about?
You know what? Well, we rehearsed. It's funny you mentioned that we're working for 2 different networks, walking on different sides of the street, but that wasn't really a factor because no network took credit. This was a joint venture, and before we did the actual broadcast the day before, in one of the rehearsals, we sat down, we took a fight from the past, took out all the commentary, and we called the fight as if it were live. And after 3 rounds, the head of HBO, as well as the head of then at Showtime, looked at me and looked at Jim Lampley and said, "It's like you've been doing this together for years. You guys didn't miss 1 second, not 1 beat, nothing. Everything was timed perfectly. The answers were clear, concise, et cetera, et cetera. The commentary was dead on." He said, "We don't need to practice anything anymore. Let's just take this right to the dance." And we did.
Did you become friends over the years with Mike, or was it strictly just a professional relationship between you and him?
Mike and I became pretty close, and we spent a little time hanging out from time to time. I have Mike Tyson's phone number in my phone. I have his number. I have Larry Holmes' number, Jerry Cooney's number. There are numbers. Chuck Webner's number, Mickey Rourke, the actor. Yeah, I met some great personalities, and over the course of time, have become friendly, and I respect them and like them all.
And what do you think of his career now? Now he's doing acting. He did a show in Vegas last week or whatnot. What do you think of Mike Tyson now? Does he deserve to have the light on him? A lot of people think that because of his conviction and all that rape case and all that he should just be a condemned man. What do you think of that? And how do you think Mike Tyson should be treated?
Mike Tyson should be treated as one of the best heavyweights that the world has ever seen. One of the few in modern-day history that have been able to unify a world title when they have 7 different world championship sanctioning bodies, which is ludicrous. Furthermore, I'd like this to be put on the record. Mike Tyson, just so you know, he did not rape that girl. Now, some people say, well, how could you possibly tell? How could you know what? Because he denied it and you're his friend? No, that's not the reason. Here's the reason. He got convicted and sentenced to 4 years. After 2 years, the warden came to him and said, if you just publicly apologize, he says, for the rape to this girl, I believe her name was Desiree. If you apologize to her publicly on camera, we're going to let you forget the last 2 years. You don't have to do the 2 more years because you've had good behavior. Now, he's been convicted. He's done 2 years. The whole entire public thinks he's guilty. If he really was guilty, why wouldn't he just say, you know what, I'm sorry, and get out and start making $30 million a fight? You know, what he did something a lot of people don't recognize and understand. He had integrity, and he said, I didn't rape her. I'll do my time, and I'll get out when I get out. But I didn't rape her, and I'm not going to say I did. Now, for a guy who's already convicted, no matter what he says, everybody's going to think he did it. To do another year in prison when he had an out, and the warden gave him an out. If he were guilty, he'd have taken that out. No question in my mind. I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind. A guilty man who's already convicted, who everybody thinks did it, is going to be given an out to just say, I'm sorry? Of course he's going to say, I'm sorry. But he didn't. I thought that showed a lot of integrity. Spent another year in prison, which probably cost him over the course of the year, $70 or $80 million, and did his time and got out for good behavior in 3 years. Says something about the man. Says a lot.
Absolutely. I think Jim Gray, actually, who did the interviews for Showtime, the post-fight interviews, or a lot of them there, he even said, I remember hearing him on some kind of documentary where he said something like that Tyson had wrote him a letter and saying something about, I will never confess to raping her because I didn't rape her, but yet I've done several other things that have been a lot worse in my life that, because why I'm here is probably what I'm paying for those particular things, but I did not rape that girl. And,
and there's a person who might believe in karma and logically, okay, I beat some people on the street when I was younger. I was running with gangs, and maybe I stole some stuff from this people or that people. And okay, so I'm paying for it now, so I'll accept it. I know a lot of people believe in karma that have reiterated similar feelings, but he did not rape that girl. I don't believe he did.
I'm from Oxnard, California. Robert Garcia, who fought on a lot of Mike's undercards, he was called the trainer of the year for last year. What did you think of him as a boxer? I know he has a lot of fans here. What did you think of him calling some of his fights there, especially the one with Diego Corrales?
You know what? I liked him. He was a good guy, and Diego Corrales was a hell of a fighter, tough guy to beat. But whenever Robert was in the fight, he was in the fight. He didn't just show up. He came to fight. I really enjoyed working with him and watching him fight. I really thought he was a wonderful guy.
And does it surprise you that he was awarded the Trainer of the Year?
Well, you know what? I didn't know much about his training. There are some fighters who could never be trainers. They could always fight well, but they couldn't train well. And there are other fighters that turn into trainers and become better trainers than they were fighters. So I don't know much about how he was training, but I'm glad for him, and I'm sure he deserved it. And
in closing, Bobby, in your opinion, do you think that Mike Tyson deserved to be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame last year? Or are you like a lot of people that feel kind of like the Pete Rose crowd would probably feel about Pete Rose being inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame? Do you think he should have been excluded from being recognized? Inducted?
He should be in the Hall of Fame. Absolutely. He should be in the Hall of Fame. And so should Pete Rose. What they did in their personal lives should preclude or exempt them from something that has been recognized as a professional accomplishment. Doesn't make sense.
Thank you very much, Bobby, once again for coming on here to TheBoxingBar.com. Thank you very much for your honest opinion. You know what? Your brilliance is very intimidating, just to let you know that. And you're always welcome here, and I hope you come back on soon in the near future.
My pleasure.